If you asked me what my favorite video game genre was, without a doubt, I'd go with platformers. But my second pick would probably be racing games. I'm not entirely sure what it is about racing games that I like so much about them, but regardless, I really like them. And while I do like me some street racing games, with the Cruisin' series and Burnout series being particular favorites of mine, I'm personally fonder of kart racers. Now, of course, when the topic of kart racers comes up, Mario Kart is more often than not the first thing that comes to people's minds, given it helped pioneer the genre. But that ain't the only kart racing king out there. You've also got stuff like Crash Team Racing and its fantastic remake, or Diddy Kong Racing and... Actually, no, we're gonna pretend its remake never happened. Or, for something more recent, Sumo Digital's amazing work, with both Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing and Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed. These are absolute staples of the kart racer genre. But that said, we're not here to talk about those. See, with the rising popularity of Mario Kart, many developers decided to take a stab at the formula themselves, with games that are often referred to as Mario Kart clones. Though I've never really liked that notion myself. Makes it sound like Mario Kart's the only kart racer of its kind that's allowed to exist. Regardless, while some of these attempts managed to make a name for themselves, such as the ones I listed before, many of them, well, didn't. But the question is, did these other kart racers fall into obscurity because of their quality? Or are there some hidden treasures that never got a chance to shine? Well, that's what we're here to talk about. I've got a handful of lesser-known kart racers here today, 6 to be specific, and we're going to take a look at them and see if any of them are any good. Don't think there's really anything else I need to elaborate on, so let's not waste any more time and get right into it. Up first, we have a game that I may have a bit of nostalgic bias for, Lego Racers. Now, growing up, I owned a ton of Lego, and I absolutely loved playing with it. And one of my favorite Lego-related products I had was this Lego Racers board game, which allowed you to not only make Lego race cars, but also build the racetrack you'd use as the board. It was freaking amazing. Well, it seems my family definitely noticed my love for this, because sure enough, one Christmas, one of my relatives ended up getting me a Lego Racers video game for the N64, something I didn't even know existed at the time. I ended up playing this game a lot over the years. But the question is, looking at it with a more critical eye, does it hold up as well as young me remembers? Spoiler alert, yes, this game is still very good. So as expected, the main hook of LEGO Racers is, of course, the building features. Right from the get-go, you're able to create your own playable characters and build how their car looks. Unfortunately, since I'm using an emulator to record this footage, I didn't have access to my old save file and thus didn't have all the build parts unlocked, so I had to work with the basics. I ended up creating 2 characters with what I had, Jebediah and Rad Jebediah. And yes, as you progress through the game, you unlock more customization parts for both your character and your car. So by the time you've beaten the game, you've got a lot to work with. Though of course, if you're not feeling too creative, there's some pre-made characters available to play as, like Joan of Kart and... Scooter. Building's not the only unique thing this game's got going for itself, though. While the gameplay is pretty standard for a kart racer for the most part, the key component that helps make LEGO Racers stand out is how it handles power-ups. It does something somewhat similar to how Diddy Kong Racing does it, where instead of just generic item boxes that randomly generate a power-up, the pickups are color-coded to different power-ups. Red bricks are for offensive weapons, blue bricks are for shields, green bricks are for speed boosts, and yellow bricks are for defensive weapons. Each power-up type has multiple different tiers, with the higher-tiered power-ups being better than the ones before. But unlike Diddy Kong Racing, where you upgrade your power-up by hitting the same colored balloon multiple times, LEGO Racers instead has these special white bricks that latch onto your power-up, upgrading what you have. And if you hit a different colored item brick while holding white bricks, the white bricks carry over. So there is a layer strategy in managing your power-ups, especially since getting hit by an offensive weapon also makes you lose white bricks. Alternatively, you just save your white bricks until you get a full-powered speed boost item, also known as the most broken power-up in the game. On top of that, the track design incorporates, of all things, puzzle solving for some of its shortcuts. Now granted, many of them are as easy as hit the wall with an offensive weapon, but some require your noggin a bit more. For example, on the track Alien Rally Asteroid, there's this UFO right at the start that, if it passes over you, drags you backwards. However, if you have a shield power in use, it'll do nothing to you. Another great example is the track Magma Moon Marathon, where you have these archways with colored lights right before a giant blue dome door. Now it's easy to miss, but there's a bar next to the dome door with a color combination. I'm sure you can piece together what to do here. No pun intended. The track design in general in this game is pretty solid, with each one visually standing out from one another quite clearly. Granted, not every track is gold though. I'm not particularly fond of Night Marathon or Adventure Temple Trail myself, but for the most part, they hold up well. The one thing that surprised me with this game is just how difficult it gets. I remember this game being hard as a kid, but I just assumed that was because kid me was bad at games. But no, as early as the 3rd Grand Prix, this game amps up the difficulty pretty quickly. Though for me nowadays, that just made this a fun challenge. Honestly, would have played more if the emulator didn't crash while recording, which, since I lacked a memory pack, meant none of my progress was saved. Oops. The game did get a sequel a few years later, but I actually haven't played it myself, so I have no idea how it holds up. Might have to try and find a copy someday so I can take a look at it. Well anyway, that's one game down, and so far so good if I do say so myself. Though now that I've said that, that means the next game's guaranteed to be not nearly as good, because that's just how these videos tend to work. So here we have Madagascar Karts, a kart racer based off DreamWorks' Madagascar movie series. Now at first glance, this definitely seems like a weird choice for a property to make a kart racer out of, but at the same time, the Madagascar movies are some of DreamWorks' most financially successful projects. So I suppose from that front, this kinda makes sense. That said though, this title, not a fan of it. Just saying it out loud, Madagascar Karts doesn't ring off the tongue very well. I get the feeling someone during development probably pitched the title Madagaskarts, only for a higher up to say no because of brand recognition or something like that. I don't know. Point is, they missed out on an obvious pun, and that makes me irrationally upset. Also, I don't know who decided on this, but guys, this isn't the 90s. Replacing S's with Z's isn't cool anymore. Actually, never really was to begin with. But you know what? Let's not judge a book by its cover. Let's see if the game itself can stand strong, starting with its underwhelming character roster. Now granted, this game came out 3 years before Madagascar 3, so they only had the first 2 movies to work off of. But even still, the roster is pretty lacking, sticking with the most basic choices you could for a Madagascar kart racer. They don't even have Nana as a playable character. That's just a travesty. Doesn't help that nearly a third of the roster consists of guest characters from other DreamWorks movies. And like, yeah, Shrek makes sense, he's DreamWorks' most recognizable character, but Bob from Monsters vs. Aliens. Clearly in addition to help market the movie, since it came out earlier that year, but man does Bob stand out like a painfully sore thumb in this game. My problem with the roster also applies to the track lineup. Like, this is really lacking. And I get it, DreamWorks was trying super hard to push Monsters vs. Aliens as their next big franchise. Definitely didn't work well, but the Monsters vs. Aliens content just sticks out way too much in this game. Honestly, with this content from Shrek and Monsters vs. Aliens, they probably should have just made this a big DreamWorks crossover racer instead. Actually, on second thought, don't do that. But of course, a lackluster lineup of characters and tracks can be ignored if the gameplay is able to carry it well. But unfortunately, Madagascar Karts is about as standard of a kart racer as you can get. The most unique mechanic it has on its belt is that drifting builds up a turbo meter that you can use at any point to boost ahead, which is a pretty good incentive to master drifting. But beyond that, the game really just plays it as safe as possible. Though is it at least a fun basic kart racer? Well, not really. And that's thanks to both the controls and the item RNG. Turning feels rather stiff, even when drifting. So oftentimes you're going to find yourself crashing into walls quite a bit, or throwing yourself into volcanoes depending on the track. But I suppose if you dedicate enough time to playing, the controls are possible to get used to. What's not possible to get used to is the item RNG. Doesn't matter what difficulty you're playing on, you're going to get bombarded with power-ups from enemy drivers, with practically no warning and very little way to defend yourself. And it absolutely kills both the pace and any potential fun to be had in this. Seriously, just take a look at this. This is on the first race on the game's easiest difficulty. Item RNG is an issue you're going to hear me bring up a few times in this video, and while Madagascar Karts doesn't have the worst case of it in comparison, it's still pretty bad. I suppose if you're a fan of Madagascar and want a simple kart racer to play, this game's relatively harmless. But speaking personally, didn't have much of a good time with this one. Not outright bad, but there's definitely better options for scratching that kart racing itch. Now before we continue on to the next game, I do want to quickly specify something. As I briefly brought up during the LEGO Racers segment, I use emulation to record my footage for reviews on older games, since my capture card's only really set up for use on newer consoles like the PS4 and Switch. Which, as a quick disclaimer, I also only emulate games I legally own, but I digress. For both Madagascar Karts and this next game, I found myself having to set up the Wii Remote portion of Dolphin Emulator, and somehow I managed to get motion inputs, Wii Wheel style tilt controls in particular, working as controller inputs on a PS4 controller. And why do I bring this all up, you may be wondering? Well, because due to this work, I may have become the first person on planet Earth to play M&M's kart racing with traditional controls. Spoiler alert, even without tilt controls, this game's horrible. We're stooping this low, everyone. For context to those who don't know about M&M's kart racing, this game here is regarded by those who know about it as not just one of the worst kart races of all time, but one of the worst games of all time in a general sense. So I'm not even gonna bother with any hopeful optimism. I've played this game before, it's really bad, so I went in knowing what I was in for. And trust me, you're in for a treat with this one. Ah, see? Nothing quite like seeing an officially licensed and released product unironically using Comic Sans. We haven't even hit the main menu yet. Now, if I can be honest for a brief moment, I've actually never really been a fan of the M&M mascot characters. They've always come off as rather smug to me, and I don't really like it. And this game definitely ain't helping with that. Their smug energy here is making me very uncomfortable. Well, actually, except for the orange M&M. He seems more uncomfortable than I am. So yeah, your playable characters are the 5 colored M&Ms. I ended up going with the red M&M for most of my playtime though, because he's got a cowboy hat, and that's a recurring theme I'm apparently going for in this video now. Also, I have no idea who some of these AI drivers are, but if I ever see one of these in a bag of M&Ms, I'm cutting myself off for life. Okay, I'll stop joking around. In all seriousness, playing this game was pretty awful. Again, I was able to play this game with the traditional controller, but even with that, the steering in this game is so bad. It's somehow both too sensitive and not sensitive at the same time, making most turns way too hard to pull off without crashing into something. Also, your car, for some reason, isn't properly programmed to go up or down slopes, because when going uphill, your speed drops to a total crawl, and when going downhill, you instead bounce down and your steering controls lock up. Though all this is definitely not helped by the track design. Some of the tracks are just far too narrow for a game like this. The Chocolate Factory and the house especially. And for the tracks that aren't narrow, there's just nothing interesting going on. I'm on an alien spacecraft, for crying out loud. This shouldn't be so mind-numbingly boring. And this is all amplified by the fact that no matter which mode you're racing on, there's absolutely no power-ups. Now granted, that means the game can't suffer an item RNG problem, but also builds on the game being really boring. The most you get are these coffee cups on the road that cause you to speed up, as well as chocolate coins that go towards unlocking more cars. It got to a point that I was deliberately trying to find ways to break the game while playing because I was so bored. Literally the most fun I had was realizing that the car just drives straight forward after you finish a race, meaning I could throw the car against walls or off cliffs while on the results screen. This is also how I found out that while on the results screen, you can still turn both the camera and your character. Now as for presentation, for a game based on colorful candies, this is one bland color palette. Seriously, the game is filled to the brim with browns and grays, and the colors it does have beyond that are so faded and muted. Even the M&M's color don't pop at all. Though of course, if you're familiar with this game, you no doubt know about the audio work. The music's overall pretty bland, but I'm more so referring to the sound effects and voice acting. Many of the sound effects are needlessly loud, all the male M&Ms have the exact same voice clips, and I don't just mean shared dialogue or a shared voice actor, I mean literally the same audio files. Though that's not the voice you're probably familiar with. I'm not sure if this is from hitting your max speed for the first time, or hitting a speed of 200 in general, it's pretty inconsistent. But either way, when you get to a certain speed, the game will be sure to notify you.
Approaching sound barrier! Approaching sound barrier! Approaching sound barrier! Approaching sound barrier!
So yeah, if you couldn't tell, M&M's kart racing isn't very good. Shocker, I know. Fortunately, this is the worst it gets out of the games I've got in this video, so we can only go up from here, which is a very reassuring thought. Next up is Pac-Man World Rally. Yes, there was a Pac-Man kart racer. Some of you may wonder how on earth you make a racing game based off Pac-Man of all things, but as the title implies, it's more so based off the Pac-Man World trilogy, which definitely offers a lot more to work off of for something like this. Like LEGO Racers, I owned this one growing up, and I do remember liking it. Not nearly as much as LEGO Racers, but that's beside the point. And sure enough, coming back to it now, yeah, it's alright. As I said earlier, this game is heavily based off the Pac-Man World games, which were 3D platformers. And that's pretty evident with the choices in both characters and tracks. You've got your standards like Pac-Man, the 4 Ghosts, Miss Pac-Man, and so on. But you've also got the main villains of all 3 World games. And many of the tracks are loosely based off locations from this trilogy. Though my favorite inclusions of the character roster are the guest characters from other Namco games. You've got Puka and Fygar from Dig Dug, and the Prince from the Katamari games, who sits on air when driving. Also, there's a Devil Pac-Man now. I had to be cursed with this knowledge, now you do too. Now, while Pac-Man World Rally does follow pretty strictly to the Mario Kart formula, there's a few little things it adds to help make it stand out, both of which cleverly tying into features from the original arcade game. For one, Pac Dots are littered throughout the track to be gobbled up, and while they could have easily made them a speed amplifier like coins in Mario Kart, or a power-up amplifier like in CTR, Pac Dots instead fill a meter that, when full, allows you to transform into a giant Pac-Man car, while every other driver turns into a ghost unicycle. For the next few seconds, you're able to gobble up any other player and leave them stunned for a short period of time. Now granted, I end up using this Pac-Mobile feature more as a failsafe, which I'll go more into that shortly, but either way, yeah, it's a neat addition. Alongside that, you're able to activate fruit pickups on the track, which are used to access shortcuts. Though admittedly, not as big a fan of this. I like the idea in concept, but going through the shortcut makes you lose that fruit. So you have to pick up the fruit every single time you want to use the shortcut. And there's not many of them across a track. Some tracks definitely implement this feature better than others. Which on that note, the track design's kinda hit and miss too. Some tracks are great, like the Ghost Mansion, the Pirate Cove, the other Namco game tracks, even though the Galaga track has very little Galaga about it, and the Katamari track is way too short, and the final track recreating the classic Pac-Man maze. But on the flip side, you've got some less than stellar tracks, like the Swamp, the Factory, and especially the Funhouse. Genuinely, one of the worst tracks I've ever experienced in a kart racer. It's really bad. Also, remember what I said earlier about bad item RNG? Yeah, this game's got a really bad case of it. It's incredibly common to have multiple blue shells, or blue bombs rather, sent after you within a short span of time. No joke, we're talking 3 of them in less than 10 seconds. Look at this nonsense.
Oh no!
Now granted, it's not quite as big of a fun killer as it was in Madagascar karts, mostly because the game controls notably better, so catching up doesn't feel as much like a slog, but it can get frustrating. You do have a shield you can access by drifting enough, but it can only protect you from certain items. So more often than not, the Pac-Mobile is going to be your means of protection from the blue bombs. Now to quickly go over some more positives, because yes, this game does have some. Visually, the game looks great. Not breathtaking or anything, but the color palette is very vibrant, with no track looking visually dull. And every character is lively and full of energy when racing. A wonderful breath of fresh air after Eminem's kart racing. Also, the soundtrack is shockingly solid. Yeah, a majority of the OST consists of remixes of old school Namco tunes, but you know what? They're really well done remixes, so I'm not complaining. So yeah, overall, Pac-Man World Rally is pretty alright. Wouldn't be one of my first choices when looking for a kart race to play, but I'm not ashamed of owning it, so that's fine by me. Also, I have no idea why this is the case, but even though this version of the game came out on the same day as the console versions, the PSP version for some reason has more content than the other versions, with 2 more guest characters and a track based on Dig Dug. I normally wouldn't be too bugged by this, but the intro of the console version includes snippets from the PSP exclusive track. It is now officially my life goal to find out why only the PSP version got this content. So the next game we have here is a bit of a strange one. It's a kart racer on the PS1 based on, of all things, Disney World. This game here is known as Walt Disney World Quest Magical Racing Tour. That's a needlessly long title if I've ever seen one. What, were they thinking they were going to end up making a Walt Disney World Quest franchise? Either way, much like the other games on this video, I am familiar with this one. I played this a fair amount at my uncle's place growing up, but it's been a very long time since I last played it, so I have no idea how it's going to turn out. Ah, the old Disney Interactive logo. Something oddly nostalgic about seeing this again. I can only hope this is a good sign for what's to come. Oh great, there goes my optimism. In case you didn't know, I'm very much not a fan of It's a Small World, so you can imagine how I was feeling when I was pleasantly reminded that the song is the game's main theme. And I hope you don't mind the song because it plays on literally every menu. Title screen, It's a Small World. Character select screen, It's a Small World. Adventure mode progress screen, It's a Small World. Level select screen, It's a Small World. I haven't even started playing this game and I'm going to lose my mind. Anyway, the story of this game, as told through Storybook by PS1 FMV Jiminy Cricket, is that Chip and Dale end up finding Disney World's fireworks machine, and Dale, like an idiot, drops his acorns into the machine, causing it to explode, with the parts scattering all over the park.
So now it's up to you to make sure the fireworks blast off tonight.
Wait, what? Why is it my responsibility? Chip and Dale are the ones who broke it, make them clean up their own mess. Also, I know this is a video game, but this premise makes zero sense with the kind of game this is. How does competing in kart races around Disney World help us find the machine parts? Now yeah, we appear to get them by winning the races, but then that begs the question, what do any of these people have to gain by taking the machine parts? Actually, even worse, Jiminy himself is playable, so he's actively trying to sabotage our mission. I thought I could trust you, PS1 FMV Jiminy Cricket. Okay, that's enough about how the story of this Disney World racing game makes no sense. Let's get to the very strange character roster. So you think with a kart racer set in Disney World, you get to play as characters from the Mickey Mouse universe. Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Goofy, you name it. Or at the very least, characters from the different Disney afternoon shows, since Chip and Dale are wearing their Rescue Rangers outfits. However, the only already existing characters in this game are Chip, Dale and Jiminy Cricket. Everyone else in this game is an original character, and I'm not really sure why. Was it a rights issue or a deliberate choice by the developers? It doesn't help that many of these new characters look like bootleg versions of characters from the Mickey Mouse universe. For example, we've got Evil Scrooge, a fusion of Pete and one of the Beagle Boys, Magica dressed up as the evil queen from Snow White, and not Gizmo Duck. But you know what? That's enough nitpicking about the roster and the story and the music and all that. How's the game itself? Well, first and foremost, despite all my jokes about it, I honestly really love the idea of the game being set in Disney World. Each track is based off a Disney World attraction, from Rock and Roller Coaster to the Haunted Mansion to... well, this game didn't age very well. And on top of that, the vehicles thematically fit whatever track you're racing on. Big Thunder Mountain, everyone's driving in train cars. Pirates of the Caribbean, everyone's driving in pirate boats. It's a really cool touch, and it gives the game a lot of personality. Also, for some of the tracks, they got their attractions' actual songs playing, such as with the Haunted Mansion and Pirates of the Caribbean. No Aerosmith on Rock and Roller Coaster, though, unfortunately. So yeah, on paper, I love the idea behind this game. But man, was the ball dropped here. Believe me, I really wanted to like this game, more so than pretty much any of the other kart races I played for this video. But I'm just gonna be honest, this game is not good. And my main problems with this game come down to 3 major components. 1, the controls. Steering in this game is unbelievably awkward, especially when drifting. I'm not sure if I'm just doing something wrong, but pretty much every time I attempted to drift, I end up going straight into the wall. It made building up my speed borderline impossible. Which brings me to component number 2, the AI. The computer opponents are brutal, pretty much right from the start of adventure mode. They not only rubber band super easily, but they also take the shortcuts. And this isn't elite game behavior. They were taking shortcuts by the 2nd level. The other part of what makes the AI brutal ties directly into problem number 3, the item RNG. Madagascar Karts and Pac-Man World Rally had bad item RNG, but this game makes them look perfectly balanced in comparison. Whether being hit by lock-on weapons on a consistent basis with no warning, or being turned into a frog that instantly slows you down, the item RNG is consistently in the computer's favor, and they will abuse their power like crazy right from the get-go. It did not take long for this game to drive me up the wall, and to be honest, I didn't even end up beating the game. By the time I got to the Jungle Cruise level, where the game threw me against a wall while on autopilot for a missile power-up, alongside me getting stuck in a corner against debris I couldn't see, I just straight up gave up. It's really a shame too, because again, I wanted to like this game. It's a great idea. But yeah, this game definitely doesn't hold up, and not just because there's a level based on Dinosaur of all movies. Not as bad as Eminem's kart racing, far from it, but this is easily the 2nd worst of the games I've played so far, and that genuinely hurts to say. And this brings us now to the final game of this video, a racing game spin-off of a life simulator spin-off of a life simulator spin-off series of a city simulator series. Otherwise known as My Sims Racing. You remember My Sims, right? The cutesy, more kid-friendly spin-off of The Sims? To those who don't, My Sims was, well, a cutesy, more kid-friendly spin-off of The Sims. What started off as a single sandbox life simulator game on the Wii and DS soon escalated into several spin-off titles, such as My Sims Kingdom, My Sims Party, My Sims Agents, My Sims Sky Heroes, and of course, My Sims Racing. Out of all the My Sims games, I only ever played the original, which my sisters played more of than I did growing up, and My Sims Racing, which I actually remember playing quite a lot back in the day. But much like Magical Racing Tour, I haven't touched this game in years, so I have no idea how it holds up. Guess we'll be finding out together, won't we? So the first thing you get to do after starting a new story mode file is to name the city your playthrough is going to take place in. I named my city Bumblyburg, because I have absolutely no shame. Bumblyburg used to be a bustling locale for kart racing, but ever since the city's star racer vanished, no one comes to race anymore. So now it's up to you and your slick racing skills to garner attention back to Bumblyburg and restore it to its former glory, all while going up against the forces of the evil Morcubus, who seeks to take the land Bumblyburg rests on for himself. As to be expected, this isn't at all a story to take very seriously, though at some points it genuinely feels like it's trying to be taken seriously. What with this mysterious hooded figure who turns out to be the missing star racer, having been crippled and lost for years after Morcubus tried to freaking murder him. But enough about overly dark tonal shifts in E-rated games, let's build us a My Sim. Much like LEGO Racers, My Sims Racing allows you to fully customize both your player character and your car. And while your options with the character are pretty limited, you have a lot of creative freedom with your car. And you get 3 separate cars of different sizes to customize and swap out whenever you like. You also unlock more stat-altering upgrades and cosmetics for all 3 cars as the game goes on, so you get a lot to work with. By the end of my playthrough though, my go-to vehicle was the large variant, which looked like this. I call it the Mathmobile. Also yes, the garden gnome on the front is in fact wearing shades. Couldn't have it any other way if you ask me. Okay, so in all honesty, going into this game, I wasn't in my best state of mind. I had just gotten off playing Magical Racing Tour, which had left me feeling bitter and pessimistic, so I was going into this game fully expecting it to be bad. Or, best case scenario, boring. So you can imagine my surprise when I discovered that this game's actually quite good! Yeah, wasn't expecting that, were you? Of all the bargain bin kart racers I grew up playing to actually hold up, I never would have guessed it would have been My Sims Racing. But yeah, genuinely good game. I was shocked. Gameplay-wise, it actually does something similar to Madagascar karts with the whole boost meter thing. But instead of just being tied to drifting, there's a lot of things that fill the boost meter. Drifting, airtime, collecting essence crystals, bumping into other drivers, and if you start boosting either when the meter's full or right after driving over a boost panel, you get a super boost. The gameplay revolves a lot more around this boost meter than Madagascar karts did, and it helps a lot in giving the game a satisfying sense of speed and making the gameplay generally more fun. It also helps that the controls are way better than basically every other game I've reviewed in this so far, aside from maybe LEGO Racers. Now admittedly, the way the game handles drifting was a bit weird to get used to. You start a drift by tapping the brake button, and if you want to sharpen your turn, you'd have to tap the brake button again, but once I got the hang of it, it felt pretty great. The track design's also pretty top notch. Granted, I wouldn't say many of the tracks were necessarily memorable, but they were all consistently fun to race on, and a few tracks did manage to stand out set piece wise, such as this music park-esque locale. Wait, actually, this game came out before Mario Kart 7, so maybe it was the other way around. And two tracks near the end of the game set on what I can only describe as pinball-themed roller coasters. The game's also just really charming overall. I've always liked the look of the My Sims characters. They're kind of adorable. And that's all captured quite well with the NPCs you interact with in the story mode, whether it be townfolk with tasks for you to do, or rival racers who want to compete with you. Like this DJ with her challenge called breaking the sound barrier.
Approaching sound barrier!
You know what? I take it back. This game sucks. If I did have one problem with this game, it's, say it with me, the item RNG. Granted, it's not nearly as bad as the others' cases, but especially this twister power-up that flips your screen upside down, it happened way too often for my liking. But aside from that, yeah, this game turned out to be way better than it honestly had any right to be. It's a racing game based off chibi Sims, and I ended up playing it for over 8 hours. Either that's proof of how good it is, or I've officially gone insane. Either outcome is entirely possible. And with that just about does it for this little marathon. While not every one of these games was fun to revisit, I'd say I had a pretty good time overall playing through these all again. LEGO Racers and My Sims Racing especially were great to come back to. And even Pac-Man World Rally made for an alright time. Shame that Magical Racing Tour didn't hold up though, and, well, I doubt anyone was expecting M&M's kart racing to be good. And Madagascar karts just kind of existed. Yeah, so with all that said, I think it's time for me to skedaddle on out of here. This has been Black Mage Maverick, and until the next video, have a nice day, everybody.